Sunlight danced through the cottage. Squeals of joy rang out from the lake as my 5-year-old swam with my dad. The baby monitor hummed as my 2-year-old napped in a pack and play covered in a mosquito net. Hot, sticky sweat rolled down my leg as I watched my mom answer the phone and whisper quietly, "Okay, I'll tell her." The sun continued to shine, the squeals of joy continued to ring out, and the baby continued to nap. The world continued to turn, except mine was about to end. My mom looked at me with tears welling in her eyes and said, "He's dead." The walls fell away, the room went dark, and my legs crumpled, and I heard someone screaming in such sorrow. And as my mother's arms wrapped around me, I realized that person screaming was me. I was 41 years old with 2 young daughters, and I was now a widow. On August 7th, 2016, my husband, my best friend, and my partner in life died of an accidental heroin overdose at home. He had struggled with depression, anxiety, and substance use disorder for almost half of our 16 years together. The life and love we had built together was gone in an instant. Like a magician's trick, he simply left this earth in a puff of smoke. He was here, and just like that, he was gone. Later that day, I was swimming in the lake with my kids, and I floated on my back in a star and stared up at the blue sky. Water covered my ears, and it covered the sounds of the life I had to return to. All I could hear was my deafening thoughts and my pounding heart. How will I survive this pain? How will I live without him? And then the most deafening thought of all, just slip under. If you let yourself slip under, you won't have to live without him. But then, those squeals of joy from my kids reached me in my floating nightmare, and I realized I had to find a way to go on. I couldn't give up. The next few weeks passed in a hellish blur of shock, numbness, and pure sorrow. I don't remember much. I did drink a lot of red wine, but that wasn't what caused the memory lapse. But what I do remember is my brain screaming at me to stop hiding, to stop letting my shame about his addiction keep me quiet. And so I began to be open and honest and vulnerable about his addiction and about his death. And as I did, and as I let people into my pain, I felt that weight that I'd been carrying for 7 years begin to lift. And I began to see the power and the life-changing magic that could come from sharing your story. And I began to wonder, what would happen if I removed the Instagram filter from my life and let the world see the true me with all of its messiness? So, since my husband has died, I can be a real buzzkill at a party. Someone will kindly and sympathetically ask me, "How did your husband die?" And I tell them the truth. He died of an accidental heroin overdose, I say. For most people, that pretty well shuts the conversation right down. Because in the unspoken hierarchy of death, overdose, it's pretty well at the bottom. But for those people who are willing to sit with their own discomfort and who are willing to sit with my pain, magic happens. Superficial small talk is swept to the side, and we get to the messy stuff. We get to the hard stuff. We get to the deep stuff. We get to the good stuff, the stuff that human connection is born of. And I found the more I shared my story, the more I found others had a similar story to share. And sharing my story began to loosen the suffocating hold that grief had on me. And it began to put a tiny ray of light into that darkness that was surrounding me. So 6 months into my new and unchosen life, I started a blog where I wrote endlessly, and I laughed and I cried endlessly as I wrote about grief and addiction. And again, the boomerang effect of putting myself, my whole self, out into the world was so powerful. People from all over the world have emailed me to say, thank you for telling your story. You are telling my story, and I don't feel alone anymore. And hearing that made me feel less alone. I felt myself healing. That light that was poking in, it was beginning to get brighter. And by sharing my story and letting others into my pain, my sorrow, and my shame, I was actually letting the light shine in. And as as the opportunities to share and connect and find solace through vulnerability continue to present themselves in my life, I couldn't ignore the signs. It was clear. Sharing my story with all its shame-filled messiness was how I was going to get through this. And as I did, and that light kept shining in and becoming more and more brilliant, wow, did it feel good. Now, let me ask you this. How many times have you had the experience where someone has said, "How are you?" And you've said, "Great," but inside you were nowhere close to great? Have you ever actually posted a picture on Instagram that shows your messy living room, or a selfie where you're not wearing makeup? What would happen if you answered that "How are you?" question with honesty? Post those less than perfect pictures. Brené Brown wisely says, vulnerability is not a weakness. It is our greatest measure of courage. So I challenge you, be courageous. Share your story, all of your stories. I guarantee you that if you take the Instagram filter off your life and let people see the real you with all of your messy bits, that brilliant light that shines in will astound you. Thank you.